MMA is one of the most exciting sports on the planet, but sometimes even this six-pack of excitement can get stale. Yeah, we don't want to see the same old fights over and over. That's why the UFC throws us a super fight every few months. Think McGregor versus Khabib. These fights are always great, sure, but the super fight we've all been waiting for, Ngannou versus Jones, might be coming up soon. Let's talk about it. First up, Jon Jones is returning to the UFC. Bones has been teasing for the better part of the whole decade with the potential move up to heavyweight. We'll be honest with you, we didn't think it was gonna happen. After all, why would the light heavyweight king need to move up at all? Yeah, we were wrong, guys, and we're glad because boy do we want to see Jones take on the stacked heavyweight division. Now, it's important to remember the last time our man fought was 3 years ago, and sure, he won, but it was a very controversial decision victory over Dominic Reyes. The fans weren't happy, so it makes sense that some people are against the idea of Jones being given a title shot as soon as he returns, right? Well, we don't know, guys. I mean, the man is undeniably the greatest fighter we've ever seen in the UFC, and his accomplishments make it hard to deny that he deserves that title shot. He was a champion at 23. 23, guys, that's unheard of. And in the years since he did it, no one has come close to breaking this record. At just 22, the man was on par with all the elites in the game. And hey, his recent 3-year hiatus was all 100% above board. The man documented his rise to heavyweight and didn't just leave the USADA testing pool for 3 years like he could have done. Yeah, it's hard not to respect that. Jon is the GOAT, and we want to see him fighting the big fights. We want to see him fight Ngannou. Next up, the potential matchups for Jones at heavyweight. Okay, now as we said before, we want to see him in there with Francis. 2 of the baddest men on the planet duking it out? Imagine how awesome that'd be. We can't help but get chills. But it doesn't always work out like that, guys. There are other options at heavyweight, and if Ngannou doesn't want to fight in March, well, then we don't think the UFC will want to delay Jones's big return. They might give him to his original target, Stipe, another all-time great. Another option could be Ciryl Gane. It could be interesting to see how he'd deal with Gane's insane movements. The man moves like a light heavyweight. He's so fast. He might be even faster than some of those light heavyweight guys. But hey, we don't think it'll be a problem for Jones. Think about it, guys. Ciryl got taken down and controlled on the ground by Francis, a wrestling rookie. Yeah, Jones is a world-class wrestler, and given how much trouble the other guy gave to Gane, Jon would probably have no problem dominating him on the ground. Following up, the dream fight, Jones versus Ngannou. Alright guys, we've heard this being said many times before, but this matchup will be the greatest thing the UFC has ever done. We were hyped for Conor versus Khabib, Oliveira versus Islam, Adesanya versus Pereira, and so many more, but this one takes the cake. He's undeniably the greatest fighter the UFC has ever produced. He's never lost, guys. Well, okay, once, but that was a DQ loss because he broke some nonsense rule. Does that count? We don't think so. The fighter is the GOAT, and you've to remember, he had such a dominant run while he was completely throwing discipline out the window. The man was partying the night before his fights, and apparently beat the great Daniel Cormier after doing some pretty heavy recreational drugs. Yeah, we're not saying that was great, but it was impressive. A big question we all always had was, hey, what if this guy cleaned up his act? How great could he be then? Well, guess what, guys? Jones is more disciplined and consistent than he's ever been during his move up to heavyweight. This man's coming to conquer. Don't get us wrong though, just because he seems unbeatable doesn't mean he can just walk through Ngannou. The man is a tank, and he has that one-punch KO power. Yeah, no matter how skilled our favorite may be, all Francis has to do is catch him once. No one could withstand a blow from the Predator, and that's what makes this fight so great. We have no idea how it's gonna go. Next up, Joe Rogan's thoughts on the potential fight. We think it's safe to say Rogan is a bones man. He's been talking about how amazing the fighter is since the beginning of his career, and even when everyone else was constantly admonishing the guy for all his controversies, he didn't back down. When the fans turned away from him, saying he'd ruin his legacy, Rogan talked about how he was a complicated character and his mistakes didn't take away from his greatness in the Octagon. Now, this isn't the same casual fan. The man is an MMA guy. And yeah, he's been talking about the fight for more than 2 years. We're with you, Joe. We want to see see this fight too. He weighed in recently on how he thought the fight would go, and unsurprisingly, he talked about how Jones was the GOAT. We get it, guys, and we even agree with him. There's no question about his ability to control distance and manage his reach is amazing. According to Joe, it's the best he's ever seen. Also, he pointed out how Jon is a world-class wrestler who took down the Olympic champion Daniel Cormier, and that even though Francis's grappling improved, as we saw in his fight against Gane, it isn't really on Jones's level yet. Joe is a pro though, and he sees the other side of it as well. If the fighter has the advantage on the ground, Ngannou has a huge advantage on the feet. Yeah, that nuclear punch of his will shatter any chin. Jones may be as big as any other heavyweight, but Francis's striking advantage is undeniable. Coming up, Bas Rutten's take on the fight. The ex-champ Rutten has a reliable voice in the MMA world. The guy's one of the greats of the heavyweight division, and you better believe that when he speaks, we listen. Bas, like Joe, is very excited about this fight, and he didn't shy away from giving his thoughts. Given how great Jon is, it's unsurprising that he had similar things to say as Rogan. That's right, he spoke of how amazing Bones was, and even called him a strategic genius. But he still wasn't sure of how the match would play out. Ngannou is bigger, and size matters, sure, but according to him, Jon has such a huge skill advantage, he might just be able to make up for the Predator's physical gifts. Rutten also made some predictions of how he thought the fight would go. Talk about how Jones would probably want to get into Ngannou's head and make him think about takedowns. It makes sense, guys. His greatest weapon in this match will be his wrestling. So if he shoots for the Cameroonian's legs early and often, well, Francis will have to think about defending a lot, making openings for Jones to exploit. The man also gave us some insight into what he thinks the rival will do. The Cameroonian has been training Muay Thai and is changing stances and shifting positions like he's never done before. He's a completely different fighter according to Rutten, and he might surprise Jon like he did with Gane. In the end, Bas was unsure, and honestly, as good as these guys are, all we can do is guess. Next up, the Count, Michael Bisping, weighs in. Another MMA legend, Bisping knows a thing or two about an unlikely title win. The man, unlike Joe and Rutten, was raising a lot of questions about Jon's ability to beat Ngannou. Now, even though we get how great he is, it's true that the man has been inactive for about 3 years. That's a lot, guys, and Bisping wondered if the ring rust was all really off the ex-light heavyweight champ as he looked to step in there with a much more battle-ready Ngannou. He talked about how even though everyone was under the impression that Jones was gonna be the one to stop Francis, he didn't think so. Think about it, guys. All the other guy has to do is clip Jon and it's lights out. The Count didn't forget that though, that Ngannou is injured too. And his whole view on the match was basically whether Jon would win or not, depending on how well his rival could recover. Finally, how likely is this match to happen? Well, guys, if we're being honest, no matter how much we want this fight, there's a real chance it won't happen. And this happens all the time. We're sure you guys remember how hyped everyone was for Stipe versus Jon, and that was a fight everyone wanted to see for a long time. But it's not gonna happen. The 40-year-old Stipe hasn't set foot in the Octagon since Francis sent him to the Shadow Realm. Originally, the Jones versus Ngannou fight wasn't even in the works, because fun fact, Bones originally wanted to fight Stipe. Anyway, now that he has agreed to fight the Predator, the main issue is Francis and his knee injury. And guys, it's a big one. There's a real chance the champ won't want to risk his knee yet in a fight with Jones. He completely tore through his MCL and the ACL. Yikes. It was so bad, he was about to pull out of the UFC 270, but luckily for us, the man's a beast, and he beat Gane with a busted up knee. Jones has a different story though, and even though he has been recovering since his bout with Ciryl, if he decides he doesn't want to fight in March, Jones will probably move on and fight Bladus. That said, we hope this fight happens. It would be an all-time classic for the ages. That's it for this one, guys. Are you as excited for this matchup as we are? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.